He was called Papy, not because he was the oldest man in the squadron, but because he carried the weight of a leader who inspired others to follow him into the fire. Gregory Pappy Boyington was brash, reckless, and often at odds with authority. Yet in the skies over the Pacific, he became something more than a soldier. He became a symbol of defiance. For many Americans who lived through the war years, the name Boyington still stirs memories of sacrifice and pride. He didn't come from privilege. He wasn't a polished officer destined for greatness. He was a rough-edged fighter who drank too much, fought too hard, and lived as if each day might be his last. But when he strapped himself into the cockpit of the F4U Corsair, all of that fire and fury transformed into brilliance. The Corsair itself was a beast, fast, rugged, and feared by its enemies. But in Boyington's hands, it became the sharpest blade in the Marine Corps arsenal. With the Black Sheep Squadron, he took a band of misfits and turned them into legends, proving that courage and determination could triumph even when the odds seemed impossible. This is not just the story of a fighter ace. It is the story of a man who embodied the restless spirit of America at war. A man who dared to challenge the rising sun over the Pacific. Stay with me, because by the end, you may see why Pappy Boyington's name still echoes in history. When we talk about Gregory Boyington, we cannot separate his name from the aircraft that carried him into legend. The F4U Corsair was unlike anything the Pacific had seen before. With its distinctive inverted gull wings and its snarling nose, it looked almost awkward sitting on the runway. But once it lifted into the sky, it became a predator. Capable of speeds over 400 miles per hour and armed with 6 heavy .50 caliber machine guns, the Corsair was built not just to fight, but to dominate. At first, even the Navy was hesitant to trust it. The plane was fast, yes, but difficult to land on carriers. It bucked and kicked like a wild horse. Pilots called it unforgiving, and for a time it was left on the sidelines. Yet the Marine Corps saw what it could do, and in the island campaigns of the Pacific, they embraced it. Against the Japanese Zero, once considered unbeatable, the Corsair proved itself faster, tougher, and deadlier. What made the Corsair remarkable wasn't just its numbers on paper. It was the way it gave its pilots the confidence to take the fight to the enemy. When Boyington gripped the stick of a Corsair, he knew he had a machine that could match his reckless courage. The Corsair could dive through clouds of tracer fire, climb higher than its opponents, and bring its pilot home even when riddled with holes. For Marines who fought island by island across the Pacific, it was more than a plane. It was a lifeline. This was the stage that would soon define Boyington's legacy. A fierce machine in the hands of a fierce man, ready to prove to the world that neither he nor his black sheep would ever back down. The Corsair gave the Marines a weapon unlike any other, but even the finest machine needs the right man to bring out its full power. That man was Gregory Pappy Boyington. Born in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and raised with little more than grit and stubbornness, Boyington never quite fit the mold of the polished officer. He was reckless, brash, and drank more than his superiors liked. Discipline was never his strong suit, yet beneath that rough exterior was a raw, undeniable talent for flying and fighting in the skies. Before America entered the war, Boyington flew with the American Volunteer Group in China, the famed Flying Tigers. There, he cut his teeth against Japanese pilots, learning their strengths and weaknesses firsthand. It was an apprenticeship forged in fire, one that gave him both confidence and the scars of experience. When he returned to the Marine Corps, he carried with him not only skill, but also a rebellious streak that made him both a problem and an asset to his commanders. That same restless spirit would lead him to the cockpit of the F4U Corsair. Unlike many of his peers, Boyington saw the potential in this powerful but demanding machine. He embraced its quirks, pushed it to its limits, and began shaping tactics that matched both the aircraft's strengths and his own audacity. But it wasn't just about him. In 1943, he was placed in charge of a squadron unlike any other, the WW2 This unit was a patchwork of pilots pulled together from different backgrounds, men who had not flown together long enough to build unity. To outsiders, they looked like misfits, a squadron destined for mediocrity. Yet under Boyington's fiery leadership, these so-called outcasts became something else entirely. They became his black sheep. What others dismissed as chaos, he transformed into cohesion. What others saw as weakness, he turned into strength. Boyington himself was far from perfect, but that was precisely why his men followed him. He was flawed, human, and utterly fearless. And because of that, the black sheep would soon make history in the skies over the Pacific. When Boyington first took command of WW2 expectations were low. The squadron was thrown together hastily, filled with men from different units who barely knew each other. They lacked the polish of veteran squadrons and carried the reputation of being undisciplined, a group unlikely to achieve anything remarkable. To the rest of the Marine Corps, they were simply the leftovers, destined to be forgotten. But Boyington saw something different. He understood that these men didn't need perfection. They needed purpose. With his fiery spirit and uncompromising will, he began molding them into a fighting force. Training sessions were grueling. He demanded aggression in the air, precision in attack, and absolute trust in one another. Mistakes were not scolded as weakness, but corrected as lessons, each one sharpening the squadron's edge. Slowly, the ragged edges of the black sheep began to smooth into steel. When they finally entered combat, the transformation was astonishing. In just 12 weeks of fighting in 1943, the Black Sheep Squadron shot down over 90 Japanese aircraft. They did it not by relying on individual heroics alone, but by working as a pack, exploiting the Corsairs' power and Boyington's daring tactics. Each victory was proof that misfits, when united under the right leader, could become legends. The name Black Sheep was supposed to be an insult, a reminder that they didn't belong. Instead, it became a badge of honor. They wore it proudly, flying into battle with a defiance that matched their commanders. What began as chaos and doubt had become one of the most feared squadrons in the Pacific, a testament to the idea that greatness often emerges from the most unlikely places. From the moment the Black Sheep Squadron took to the skies, Boyington's presence was unmistakable. He didn't just lead from the ground, he led in the air, where every decision was a gamble of life and death. His flying style was aggressive, almost reckless to outsiders, but it carried with it an instinct sharpened by years of combat. Over the waters of the Solomon Islands and above the stronghold of Rabaul, he turned those instincts into victories that would cement his place in history. Within just a few months of combat, Boyington's Corsair was credited with 26 confirmed kills. Each tally mark on his record represented a zero or another Japanese aircraft that had fallen from the sky, often in the middle of desperate, swirling dogfights. His success was not luck. It was the product of his unmatched boldness, his deep understanding of enemy tactics, and his ability to push the Corsair beyond what many thought it could do. To his men, his victories meant more than numbers. They were proof that their squadron, once dismissed as undisciplined misfits, could match and even surpass the finest enemy pilots. Every kill raised morale. Every successful mission strengthened the bond between commander and squadron. Boyington became a living example of the very courage he demanded from his men. By late 1943, his score made him the Marine Corps' top ace, earning him the title Ace of Aces. He was awarded the Medal of Honor and the Navy Cross, honors that recognized not only his skill, but his willingness to risk everything for his squadron. For a man once considered a troublemaker, Boyington had become a symbol of defiance and hope. His victories were not just his own. They belonged to every black sheep who followed him into the storm. For all his triumphs in the sky, Boyington's path was never without risk, and the price of glory would eventually come due. In January 1944, while leading a mission near the heavily defended Japanese base at Rabaul, his Corsair was torn from the sky. The man who had seemed untouchable, who had built a reputation on daring raids and impossible victories, suddenly found himself plunging into the ocean, the hunter now becoming the hunted. Rescued not by his fellow Marines but by the enemy, Boyington was captured and thrust into the harsh reality of life as a prisoner of war. For over 20 months he endured captivity at the hands of the Japanese. Food was scarce, conditions were brutal, and the constant uncertainty of survival weighed on him daily. Many in America believed he was gone, another ace lost to the unforgiving skies of the Pacific. His squadron carried on without him, but the shadow of their commander's absence was deeply felt. Yet even in captivity, Boyington's spirit did not break. Stripped of his aircraft, denied the freedom of the skies, he held on to the same defiance that had made him both a rebel and a leader. That stubborn resilience became his shield, sustaining him until the war finally came to its end. When he returned home, gaunt and worn but alive, he was welcomed not as a forgotten casualty, but as a living legend. His survival was itself a victory, a testament to the endurance of a man who had already given everything in the air. The price he paid was heavy, but it only deepened the respect his country held for him. The Black Sheep's commander had walked through fire, and against all odds, he had come back. When Boyington finally returned home, he carried not only the scars of battle and imprisonment, but also a legacy that would outlive him. The Black Sheep Squadron, once seen as a ragtag group of outcasts, had become a name etched into Marine Corps history. Their victories in the Corsair had shown that even those dismissed as misfits could rise to extraordinary heights when led with courage and conviction. Boyington himself became more than just an ace. His memoir, Ba Ba Black Sheep, captured the grit and raw humanity of his journey, later inspiring a popular television series in the 1970s. For a new generation, it brought his story back to life, reminding Americans of a time when the stakes were nothing less than survival and freedom. Through those stories, Boyington became not just a figure in history books, but a voice that continued to speak to the restless and the determined. The true legacy of Pappy Boyington and the Black Sheep is not measured only in aircraft shot down or medals awarded. It lies in the spirit they embodied, the belief that leadership can turn doubt into strength, that unity can be forged from chaos, and that even the most unlikely men can leave an indelible mark on history. Their story still resonates because it reminds us that greatness often emerges from imperfection. The Black Sheep taught the world that sometimes it is the ones who don't fit in who end up changing everything. The story of Gregory Pappy Boyington does not end with the count of victories or the medals he wore on his chest. His life reminds us that history is shaped as much by flawed men who refuse to quit, as by the perfect heroes we imagine. The Corsair was a machine of steel and fire, but in Boyington's hands it became something greater, a symbol of defiance, resilience, and the will to fight against impossible odds. The Black Sheep Squadron, once mocked as misfits, became living proof that courage and leadership can transform weakness into strength. Their battles were more than tactical victories. They were moments that lifted the spirits of a nation at war. For those who watched from afar, Boyington and his squadron embodied the belief that even in chaos, determination could carve out triumph. Today, his legacy endures not just in the records of the Marine Corps, but in the memories of all who cherish the stories of ordinary men who became extraordinary under pressure. Pappy Boyington carried the Corsair into history, and in doing so he left behind a reminder that greatness is not reserved for the flawless. It belongs to those who dare, who lead, and who inspire others to believe. His name, like the wings of the Corsair, still casts a shadow across the skies of the Pacific, eternal and unforgotten. Make sure to hit subscribe so you won't miss more inspiring historical stories about the people who changed the course of war.